Excuse me, miss. This line is for business travelers only. The regular security checkpoint is back that way.
Victoria Blackwell's voice cut through the bustling chaos of JFK Terminal 4 like a blade through silk. She stood behind the first-class security podium in her perfectly tailored navy blazer, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, every inch the picture of corporate authority. Her emerald eyes locked onto the young black woman in front of her with the kind of practiced disdain that comes from years of deciding who belongs and who doesn't. The woman she was addressing looked up calmly. Dr. Maya Rodriguez, though Victoria didn't know that name yet, stood there in faded jeans and an oversized MIT sweatshirt, a simple black backpack slung over one shoulder. At 31, Maya had the kind of quiet confidence that comes not from proving yourself once, but from proving yourself over and over until you stop caring who doubts you. "I have a first-class boarding pass," Maya said evenly, holding up her phone. The digital ticket glowed clearly on the screen. First-class seat 2A. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her clipboard. She'd been head of terminal security operations for 3 years, and she prided herself on maintaining what she called premium experience standards. In her mind, that meant keeping certain types of people in their proper places. "Anyone can fake those these days," Victoria replied, her voice carrying just loud enough for the other passengers in line to hear. "I'm going to need to see some identification. Before we dive deeper into what's about to unfold, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments below, because what happens next will shock you. This isn't just a story about one woman and one security officer. It's about power assumptions and the moment when someone's worst judgment call becomes their biggest mistake. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, especially in a place where you actually had more power than the person judging you, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out." Maya calmly reached into her backpack and pulled out her driver's license along with a black American Express Centurion card. She placed both on the metal counter without a word. The license read Dr. Maya Rodriguez, and the credit card had no preset spending limit. Victoria picked up both items with 2 fingers as if they might contaminate her. She squinted at the license, then at Maya, then back at the license. The name meant nothing to her, but it should have. In exactly 18 minutes, that name would be plastered across every news screen in America. Dr. Rodriguez, Victoria said, drawing out each syllable with skepticism. "And what kind of doctor are you?" "The kind with a PhD in civil engineering from MIT and another in computer science from Stanford," Maya replied quietly. Her voice carried no anger, no defensiveness, just facts. A few people in line were starting to pay attention. Sarah Williams, a travel blogger from Portland, had been scrolling through her phone when she heard the exchange. Something about Victoria's tone made her look up. Sarah had built her following by documenting travel experiences, but this felt different. This felt important. She quietly opened her Instagram and started recording. "That's nice," Victoria said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "Unfortunately, I'm still going to need to verify these credentials. Security protocols, you understand." Maya understood perfectly. She understood that no other passenger in this line would be asked to verify their PhD. She understood that Victoria had made a decision about who she was the moment she'd seen her skin color and casual clothes. And she understood something else that Victoria didn't. She was about to become the most powerful woman in Victoria's professional world. "Of course," Maya said. "Take all the time you need." Victoria walked to her computer terminal and pretended to run some kind of verification check. What she was actually doing was hoping Maya would get frustrated and storm off to the regular security line, making Victoria's life easier. What she didn't realize was that Maya had all the time in the world and very good reasons for staying exactly where she was. Behind Maya, the line was growing restless. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his Rolex and sighed loudly. A woman with 3 designer shopping bags shifted impatiently. But Maya stood perfectly still, her calm presence somehow making Victoria more agitated. "Is there a problem here?" asked Carlos Mendez, a junior security officer who'd been watching from his position at the X-ray machine. At 28, Carlos had worked at JFK for 2 years and had noticed Victoria's pattern of giving certain passengers a harder time. He'd never said anything, but it made him uncomfortable. "Everything's under control, Mendez." Victoria snapped without looking at him. "Just doing my job." Carlos nodded but didn't move away. Something about Maya's composure interested him. Most passengers would be angry by now, demanding supervisors making scenes. Maya just stood there like she was waiting for something. Sarah Williams' Instagram livestream was starting to gain viewers. "Something ugly is happening at JFK right now," she whispered to her camera. "Terminal 4, first class security. A woman is being harassed for no reason I can see." Victoria finally returned to the podium. "I'm sorry, Dr. Rodriguez, but I can't verify your credentials in our database. I'm going to have to ask you to use the standard security checkpoint." "What database would that be?" Maya asked politely. Victoria faltered for a moment. The federal database of certified professionals." Maya smiled slightly. It wasn't a mean smile or a mocking one. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what game was being played and had already won it. "That's interesting," Maya said, "because I wasn't aware the TSA maintained a database of PhD holders. Could you show me which regulation requires doctorate verification for first-class passengers?" Victoria's face flushed slightly beneath her foundation. She wasn't used to passengers who knew regulations. "Listen," Miss Victoria started. Dr. Maya corrected gently. "Doctor, I don't have time for games. Either use the appropriate line or I'll have to call security." The irony wasn't lost on Maya. Victoria was security threatening to call security on someone who in about 15 minutes would technically be Victoria's boss's boss's boss. "I understand you're just doing your job," Maya said. "But I have a valid first-class ticket, valid identification, and I haven't violated any regulations. So I'll wait right here while you figure out what your actual job requires." The businessman behind Maya spoke up. "Come on, lady, just check her ticket and let's move this along. Some of us have planes to catch." Victoria's eyes flashed. She hated being challenged, especially in front of an audience. And that audience was growing. Sarah's live stream now had over 200 viewers, and 2 other passengers had their phones out. "Fine," Victoria said sharply. "Put your bags on the belt and step through the scanner." Maya complied, placing her backpack and a small rolling suitcase onto the conveyor belt. As she walked through the metal detector, it beeped. Standard procedure. "Step back, please," Victoria ordered, her voice carrying more authority now. She was back in control, or so she thought. Maya stepped back and began removing her watch, a simple fitness tracker. "It's probably this," Maya said, holding up the watch. "I'll decide what it is," Victoria replied. Arms out for additional screening. As a female TSA agent began the pat-down, Victoria moved to the X-ray monitor. Maya's backpack showed the usual contents: laptop, chargers, documents. But the rolling suitcase contained something that made Victoria's pulse quicken. There, nestled in custom foam padding, was a cylindrical metal device about 6 inches long with complex internal components visible on the scanner. To someone trained in security, it looked suspicious. To someone already convinced she was dealing with a problem passenger, it looked like confirmation. Victoria's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Finally, she had something real. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me," Victoria announced loudly. "Your luggage contains a suspicious device that requires further investigation." The terminal seemed to freeze for a moment. Other passengers stepped back. Sarah Williams' live stream viewer count spiked as people shared the feed. Carlos Mendez frowned and moved closer to get a better look at the screen. Maya finished the pat-down and walked calmly to where Victoria stood beside the X-ray monitor. "That's a prototype scanner I'm transporting for a technology summit in London," Maya explained. "It's completely harmless. I have all the documentation." "I'm sure you do," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "People like you always have explanations." The words hung in the air like a slap. Sarah Williams' stream exploded with comments. Carlos Mendez's expression hardened. And somewhere deep in Maya's mind, a decision crystallized. This wasn't just about one security officer on a power trip anymore. This was about every assumption, every bias, Every time someone had looked at her and decided who she was without knowing anything about her. This was about every time the playing field had been tilted against people who looked like her. And, in exactly 13 minutes, Victoria Blackwell was going to learn the most expensive lesson of her career. Maya Rodriguez had been underestimated before. At 12, teachers suggested she skip advanced math because some students just aren't built for STEM. At 18, MIT admissions counselors questioned whether she really belonged in their engineering program. At 24, venture capitalists told her that infrastructure wasn't sexy enough for serious investment. She'd proven them all wrong, but not through anger or defiance. Through quiet, relentless excellence that spoke louder than any argument. Now, standing in the first-class security line at JFK Terminal 4 on a humid Tuesday evening in September, Maya reflected on the path that had brought her here. Titan Infrastructure Solutions. The company she'd built from a cramped garage in Oakland was about to announce the largest airport modernization contract in U.S. history. $15.2 billion. Enough to rebuild JFK from the ground up. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was being harassed in the very airport she was about to own, metaphorically speaking. Maya had chosen to fly commercial today for a specific reason. She could afford private jets, helicopters, or any other form of transportation money could buy, but she believed in what she called ground truth, understanding the real experience of the people who would use the spaces she designed. How could she fix airport security if she never experienced it herself? She dressed down intentionally well-worn jeans, her old MIT sweatshirt from graduate school, comfortable sneakers. No jewelry except her simple fitness tracker. No designer anything. She wanted to see how the average traveler was treated, especially travelers who looked like her. The results had been immediately educational. Victoria Blackwell, meanwhile, had built her entire career on control and first impressions. At 38, she'd climbed from entry-level TSA screener to head of terminal security operations through a combination of rigid rule-following and an uncanny ability to spot what she called irregularities. Victoria prided herself on her appearance. The navy blazer was Armani-tailored to perfection. Her blonde hair was professionally styled twice a week. Her makeup was flawless, her nails pristine. She understood that in her line of work, projecting authority was half the battle. She'd grown up in Connecticut, daughter of a corporate lawyer and a real estate developer. Her world had been country clubs and private schools where everyone looked like her and shared her assumptions about how the world worked. She'd never questioned those assumptions because they'd never failed her. Until tonight. So, what exactly is this device, Victoria asked, pointing to the X-ray screen where Maya's prototype scanner appeared as a dense metallic object with complex internal wiring. It's a portable geological scanner, Maya explained patiently. It uses low-frequency sonic pulses to analyze soil composition and structural integrity. I'm presenting it at a clean energy summit in London tomorrow. Victoria's eyes narrowed. And you just carry million-dollar technology in your luggage. It's a prototype, Maya said, worth maybe $10,000 in parts. The valuable part is the software, which is stored securely in the cloud. Sarah Williams had moved closer with her phone, her live stream now approaching 1,000 viewers. The comments were flowing fast. This is straight-up profiling. What airport is this? Someone needs to report this. That woman is staying so calm I would have lost it. Carlos Mendez watched the interaction with growing discomfort. He'd worked with Victoria for over a year and had noticed patterns in her behavior. Certain passengers got extra scrutiny. Certain names got mispronounced. Certain people got the benefit of the doubt and others didn't. He'd never said anything because Victoria was his superior and he needed this job. But watching Maya's calm dignity in the face of obvious bias made his silence feel complicit. "Ma'am," Carlos said quietly, stepping forward. "The device shows up as standard electronics on the scanner. No explosive materials, no prohibited components." Victoria turned to him sharply. "Did I ask for your opinion, Mendez?" "No, ma'am." "But our protocols are that I handle sensitive situations. Go back to your station." Carlos hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly stepped back. But he didn't return to his station, and he quietly pulled out his phone. Maya observed this exchange with interest. She recognized Carlos as someone caught between doing right and keeping his job. She'd been in similar positions herself early in her career when speaking up could cost everything. "Miss Blackwell Maya," said, reading Victoria's name tag, "I understand you're concerned about security. I appreciate that. But I have documentation for this device, proper export licenses, and a letter from the Department of Commerce authorizing its transport." "Show me," Victoria demanded. Maya reached for her backpack, but Victoria held up a hand. "Don't touch the bag. Tell me where the documentation is and I'll retrieve it. Front pocket, blue folder," Maya said. Victoria unzipped the pocket and pulled out a leather document holder. Inside were multiple official papers, export licenses, technical specifications, letters of authorization, and a business card that made Victoria pause. The card read, "Dr. Maya Rodriguez, CEO and founder, Titan Infrastructure Solutions." Titan Infrastructure. Victoria had heard that name somewhere recently. Something about a big contract, though she couldn't quite place it. "Infrastructure," Victoria said aloud. "Like construction, among other things," Maya replied. "We design and build large-scale projects, airports, bridges, clean energy facilities. And you're the CEO of this company." "I am." Victoria studied Maya's face, looking for signs of deception. Young black, dressed like a college student. Nothing about her fit Victoria's mental image of a CEO, therefore Victoria concluded she probably wasn't one. "Right," Victoria said. "And I'm the Queen of England." The comment sparked another wave of outrage in Sarah's live stream. Someone had already identified the airport and was posting contact information for JFK security management. The hashtag JFK discrimination was starting to trend. Maya absorbed Victoria's sarcasm without reaction. She'd heard it all before. The doubt, the disbelief, the assumption that her success must be fake or exaggerated. She'd learned long ago that the best response wasn't anger, but patience. Let people reveal who they really were. "I understand this is hard to believe," Maya said. "Would you like me to have someone verify my identity?" "Actually, yes," Victoria said, pulling out her radio. "I'm calling for additional security. We need to properly investigate the situation." As Victoria spoke into her radio, Maya reached for her phone. She had one call to make, and it would change everything. But she waited. There was a lesson unfolding here, not just for Victoria, but for everyone watching. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone's bias run its full course, documented and witnessed, so that when the truth comes out, the contrast is undeniable. Detective James Murphy was wrapping up paperwork when Victoria's call came through. A 20-year veteran of the Port Authority Police, Murphy had seen every kind of airport incident imaginable. But something in Victoria's voice, a combination of excitement and vindication, made him pay attention. "We've got a suspicious passenger in Terminal 4, first-class security," Victoria reported. "Unverified identity, questionable documentation, and suspicious electronic device. Need immediate assistance." Murphy sighed. He knew Victoria's reputation for being thorough. Some might say overly so, but protocol was protocol. "On my way," he replied. As Murphy headed toward Terminal 4, Maya made her decision. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Rachel." "It's Maya. Yes, I'm fine. But it's happening. Execute Protocol 7. The call lasted less than 30 seconds, but it set in motion a chain of events that would reshape Victoria's understanding of power, authority, and the dangerous assumption that you can judge someone's worth by their appearance. Victoria didn't know it yet, but she had just picked a fight with the most powerful woman she'd ever meet. And in about 10 minutes, everyone would know it. The terminal hummed around them with the usual airport chaos announcements echoing off glass walls, the rumble of luggage wheels on polished floors, the distant roar of aircraft engines. But in their small corner of the first-class security checkpoint, tension crystallized around two women who couldn't have been more different. One saw a problem to be solved. The other saw a system to be understood. One relied on assumptions and authority. The other relied on facts and patience. One was about to learn that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most power to change it. The clock on the wall read 7:12 p.m. In 18 minutes, everything Victoria thought she knew about her place in the world would crumble. Detective James Murphy arrived at the security checkpoint to find a small crowd gathering. As a veteran police officer, he could sense tension before he saw it, and this situation practically vibrated with it. Victoria Blackwell stood behind the X-ray station like a general commanding her troops, which in this case meant Carlos Mendez and two other security officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The suspicious passenger sat calmly on a metal bench, hands folded, expression serene. Murphy's first impression of Maya Rodriguez was that she didn't look like trouble. Young professional, composed. But Victoria had sounded urgent on the radio, and Murphy had learned to trust his officer's instincts. Usually. What do we have? Murphy asked Victoria. Suspicious passenger with questionable identification and a prohibited device, Victoria said, gesturing toward Maya. Claims to be a CEO, but can't verify credentials. The device could be an improvised explosive. Murphy looked at the X-ray screen, then at Maya, then back at Victoria. In 20 years of police work, he'd developed a sense for when stories didn't quite fit together. "Have you examined the device?" Murphy asked. "It's locked in a high-security case. She refuses to open it." Maya spoke for the first time since Murphy had arrived. "Actually, I offered to open it and explain exactly what it is. Miss Blackwell preferred to confiscate it." Murphy turned to Maya. "And you are Dr. Maya Rodriguez." She handed him her identification and the business card Victoria had dismissed earlier. Murphy studied both documents carefully. Unlike Victoria, he didn't make snap judgments based on appearances. The ID looked authentic, the business card expensive. Titan Infrastructure Solutions. The name sounded familiar. "What kind of business is Titan Infrastructure?" Murphy asked. "We design and build large-scale infrastructure projects," Maya replied. "Airports, bridges, transportation hubs. I'm in New York for contract negotiations. And this device, a prototype geological scanner. I'm presenting it at a clean energy summit in London tomorrow. It analyzes soil composition using sonic pulses, completely harmless." Murphy looked at Victoria. "You verified this?" How Victoria's composure slipped slightly. The device appeared suspicious on the X-ray, and her story doesn't add up." Look at her," how Murphy asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria realized she'd walked into dangerous territory, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "She doesn't look like a CEO," Victoria said. Young, inappropriately dressed, suspicious travel patterns. Murphy's expression hardened. In 20 years of police work, he'd heard every euphemism for racial profiling ever invented. He recognized them all. Meanwhile, Sarah Williams's Instagram livestream had exploded. Over 5,000 viewers were now watching, sharing, commenting. Someone had identified JFK Terminal 4 and was posting contact information for Port Authority management. The hashtag JFK discrimination was gaining momentum across social media. Carlos Mendez had been watching the entire interaction with the growing discomfort. As a Hispanic man working in airport security, he'd faced his own share of assumptions and biases. Watching Maya's calm dignity in the face of obvious prejudice reminded him of every time he'd bitten his tongue to keep his job. But something about this situation felt different. Maya's composure wasn't just patience, it was confidence, like she knew something the rest of them didn't. Carlos made a decision. He pulled out his phone and started recording his own video. "This is Carlos Mendez, JFK Security," he said quietly to his camera. "I'm documenting what appears to be racial profiling by my supervisor. This passenger has done nothing wrong." Victoria was too focused on Murphy to notice Carlos's rebellion, but Maya saw it, and she gave him the slightest nod of acknowledgement. Detective Murphy, Maya said, "I appreciate your professionalism. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about my travel or the device in my luggage." Murphy pulled out a small notebook. Unlike Victoria, he believed in documentation and proper procedure. "Purpose of travel?" he asked. "Business. I'm flying to London for a clean energy summit, then returning to New York Thursday for a major contract announcement." "What kind of contract?" Maya paused for just a moment. This was where it got interesting. Infrastructure modernization. Large scale. That's all I can say until the official announcement. Murphy nodded and made notes. Professional, coherent, consistent. Nothing about Maya's responses raised red flags for someone trained to spot deception. And the device prototype geological scanner developed by my company's R&D division uses sonic pulse technology to analyze subsurface composition. We're presenting it as part of a clean energy initiative. Documentation. Maya gestured toward the blue folder Victoria had confiscated. Export licenses, technical specifications, Department of Commerce authorization. Everything required for international transport of prototype technology. Murphy examined the documents carefully. They looked legitimate, official, properly stamped and signed. Nothing suspicious about any of it. Miss Blackwell-Murphy said, "What specific regulation does this violate?" Victoria faltered. She... The device appeared suspicious. Appeared suspicious, how? What training do you have in explosive device identification? I've been doing security for 15 years. That's not what I asked. Do you have bomb squad training, EOD certification? Any technical background in electronics or explosive devices? Victoria's face flushed. She was losing control of the situation, and she knew it. The device has wiring and a battery pack, she said defensively. That's suspicious. So does every laptop, tablet, and phone that goes through your checkpoint, Murphy replied. That's not a valid reason for detention. Maya watched the exchange with fascination. She was seeing the exact moment when proper procedure collided with personal bias. Murphy was doing his job professionally. Victoria was protecting her ego. The crowd around them had grown larger. Other passengers had missed flights before because of security delays, but this felt different. This felt like something worth witnessing. Sarah Williams had positioned herself where she could capture everything. Her viewer count was approaching 10,000 with comments flowing faster than she could read them. This is insane. Sue the airport. What's her company name again? Someone find out who she really is. That last comment would prove prophetic. Dr. Rodriguez Murphy said, "Would you be willing to demonstrate the device to resolve this situation?" "Absolutely," Maya replied. "Though I should mention that it's quite expensive and somewhat fragile. I'd prefer to handle it myself." Victoria stepped forward quickly. "No, she doesn't touch anything until we know what it is." Murphy looked at Victoria with the expression cops reserve for people who are actively making their jobs harder. "Miss Blackwell, we have a cooperative passenger with proper documentation offering to demonstrate a device that poses no obvious threat. What's your objection? I don't trust her," Victoria said bluntly. The words echoed through the checkpoint area. Even the background noise of the terminal seemed to quiet for a moment. "You don't trust her?" why Murphy asked. Victoria looked around the crowd, suddenly aware that dozens of people were watching phones recording social media streaming. She was the center of attention, but not in the way she'd intended. I just don't trust her." Maya spoke softly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Officer Murphy, I think Miss Blackwell has made her position clear. I'm happy to comply with whatever procedure you think is appropriate." Murphy made his decision. "Ma'am, I'm going to examine your device with you present. If it's what you say it is, you're free to go." "Fair enough, more than fair," Maya replied. As they moved toward the examination table, Maya checked her watch. 7:21 p.m. In 9 minutes, everything would change. But first, Victoria Blackwell was going to get exactly what she'd asked for a close look at what Maya Rodriguez had in her luggage. She just had no idea she was about to discover the most expensive mistake of her career. Maya's rolling suitcase lay open on the metal examination table like evidence in a crime scene. The prototype scanner nestled in its custom foam padding looked exactly like what it was sophisticated technology wrapped in industrial design. Detective Murphy examined it with the careful attention of someone who'd seen actual explosive devices and knew the difference. The cylindrical housing was titanium alloy precision machined. The internal components visible through diagnostic windows showed circuit board sensors and a compact battery pack. Expensive, definitely. Dangerous, definitely not. It's exactly what she said Murphy announced. Geological scanner. I can see the sonic pulse generators, the data processing unit, the soil sample sensors. This is sophisticated engineering equipment. Victoria's jaw tightened. She'd been so certain, so confident in her judgment, but Murphy's assessment was stripping away her last justification for the detention. How do we know it's not modified? Victoria insisted. How do we know it's not hiding something else? Maya stepped forward calmly. Would you like me to run a diagnostic? The device has a self-test mode that will demonstrate all its functions. Yes, Murphy said before Victoria could object. Please do. Maya lifted the scanner from its foam housing with careful precision. It was heavier than it looked, dense with technology. She touched a sequence of spots on its surface, and suddenly it came alive. A soft blue light pulsed along its length. A gentle humming sound filled the air. The display screen on top showed scrolling data diagnostic mode. All systems functional, soil analysis ready, depth range 0, 50 meters. The blue light indicates the sonic pulse generator is active, Maya explained. The humming is the internal processor running system checks. If I were to point this at the ground, it would analyze soil composition, moisture content, and structural stability down to 50 meters depth. She touched the surface again, and the device powered down, returning to silent metal. Satisfied, Murphy asked Victoria. But Victoria was beyond rational assessment now. She'd made a public stand, drawn a line in the sand, and she couldn't retreat without admitting she'd been wrong from the beginning. I still think this situation needs further investigation, Victoria said. I'm calling for additional backup. Murphy stared at her. Additional backup for what? We've examined the device. We've verified her identification. We've reviewed her documentation. What exactly are you investigating? Victoria's radio crackled to life before she could answer. All units be advised, media crews are gathering outside Terminal 4. Some kind of major announcement expected at 7:30. Please maintain normal operations. Maya checked her watch again. 7:25 p.m., 5 minutes. Carlos Mendez had been watching everything with growing amazement. Not just at Victoria's stubbornness, but at Maya's supernatural calm. Most people would be shouting by now, demanding supervisors, threatening lawsuits. Maya just stood there like she was waiting for something. And then Carlos realized she was waiting for something. Miss Rodriguez, Carlos said, stepping forward against protocol, "You seem very patient for someone being wrongly detained." Maya smiled at him. It was the first genuine smile she'd shown all evening. "Officer Mendez, right?" she said, reading his name tag. "I'm patient because I believe in process. Even when that process is flawed, it usually finds its way to the truth eventually." And what truth is that Victoria demanded? Maya looked directly at Victoria for the first time since this began. Not with anger or defiance, but with something that looked almost like pity. "The truth, Miss Blackwell, is that in about 4 minutes, every television screen in this airport is going to show you exactly who you've been harassing for the last 20 minutes. Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" Maya pulled out her phone and showed them the home screen. At 7:30 p.m., she had a calendar appointment that simply read CNN, live announcement. "I tried to tell you," Maya said quietly. "I'm in New York for contract negotiations. Very large contract negotiations. The kind that make national news." Murphy was beginning to understand. "What kind of contract?" "The kind that gives my company operational control over this airport's infrastructure for the next 15 years, Maya said, "including security operations." The blood drained from Victoria's face. Sarah Williams' live stream had reached 25,000 viewers. Someone in the comments had started researching Titan infrastructure solutions and posting links. The story was taking on a life of its own. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered. "Is it?" Maya asked. "Have you been watching the news lately?" The Port Authority's massive infrastructure modernization project, $15.2 billion, largest airport renovation in U.S. history. Victoria's hands were shaking now. She had heard about the project. Everyone in airport operations had heard about it, but she'd never bothered to learn who won the contract. "I'm the CEO of Titan Infrastructure Solutions," Maya said simply. "As of 7:30 tonight, that becomes public information. As of Monday morning, we begin Phase 1 of completely rebuilding this airport. including new security protocols. Murphy stepped back slightly. In 20 years of police work, he'd never seen someone dig their own grave quite this thoroughly. "Miss Blackwell," Murphy said quietly, "I think you need to release Dr. Rodriguez immediately." "No," Victoria said desperately. She could be lying. Anyone can make claims. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and nodded. "My assistant just confirmed the news crews are in position," Maya said. "CNN, MSNBC, Fox Business. The press conference starts in 2 minutes. Carlos Mendez stepped forward with his phone. "Ma'am, I've been recording this entire interaction. Everything Miss Blackwell said and did. I think maybe my video is going to be important evidence." Victoria spun around to stare at Carlos. "You've been recording without permission, in a public space where passengers were being mistreated." "Yes, ma'am." "I have." Maya looked at Carlos with genuine respect. "Officer Mendez, you did the right thing." That took courage. The terminal's PA system crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the monitors throughout the terminal. We have a special announcement beginning now." Every screen in Terminal 4 flickered and changed to CNN's breaking news logo. Victoria looked around wildly, finally understanding that she'd walked into a moment that was about to define the rest of her career. Maya Rodriguez stood calmly in the center of it all, no longer just a passenger being harassed by security. In about 60 seconds, she would be revealed as one of the most powerful women in American infrastructure. And Victoria Blackwell, who'd spent 20 minutes proving that she couldn't recognize power when it stood right in front of her, was about to learn the most expensive lesson in the history of airport security. The clock hit 7:29 p.m. Miss Blackwell, Maya said softly, "You might want to watch this." The CNN logo filled every screen in Terminal 4, accompanied by the familiar breaking news chime. Passengers throughout the terminal paused their conversations, pulled out earbuds, and turned their attention to the monitors. "Good evening. I'm Miguel Santos reporting live from Manhattan," the anchor announced. "We're about to hear from Dr. Maya Rodriguez, CEO of Titan Infrastructure Solutions, regarding what's being called the largest infrastructure contract in American history." Victoria Blackwell felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The name echoed through the terminal like a judgment. Maya Rodriguez. The same name on the identification she'd dismissed, the same name on the business card she'd mocked. Maya stood perfectly still beside the security checkpoint, her expression unchanged. But Detective Murphy noticed something different about her posture now. The quiet confidence had transformed into something more potent. This was a woman stepping into her power. $15.2 billion, the CNN anchor continued to completely modernize and rebuild John F. Kennedy International Airport. The project will transform JFK into what Dr. Rodriguez calls the world's first truly sustainable major airport. Sarah Williams' Instagram livestream exploded with activity. Over 50,000 viewers were now watching, and the comment section moved too fast to follow. "No way. This is the same woman. She's literally being harassed at her own airport. Record everything. This is about to go viral." Carlos Mendez kept his phone steady, documenting Victoria's growing panic. He'd been recording for 15 minutes now, capturing every dismissive comment, every assumption, every moment of bias played out in real time. "I need to sit down," Victoria whispered, but there were no chairs. She leaned against the X-ray machine for support. Maya finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the checkpoint area. "Miss Blackwell, would you like to continue detaining me, or would you prefer to watch the announcement?" Victoria couldn't form words. Other security officers were gathering now, drawn by the commotion and the growing crowd. Word was spreading through the terminal's staff. The woman being harassed by Victoria Blackwell was about to be revealed as their new boss. Detective Murphy pulled out his radio. "This is Murphy in Terminal 4. I need immediate supervisory response to first-class security. We have a situation." The CNN broadcast continued. Dr. Rodriguez, a 31-year-old MIT and Stanford graduate, built Titan infrastructure from a garage startup to one of America's leading engineering firms. Her company specializes in sustainable large-scale construction, including the revolutionary terminal designs that caught the Port Authority's attention. A photograph of Maya appeared on screen. Professional headshot, confident smile, wearing a Navy business suit. The contrast with the casually dressed woman standing in the security checkpoint was striking, but the face was unmistakably the same. More airport staff were arriving now. David Miller, the airport operations manager, pushed through the crowd with barely controlled panic. He'd heard rumors of a situation in security, but he hadn't expected this. "What the hell is going on here?" Miller demanded, looking between Victoria and Maya. Murphy stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, we have a passenger who was detained on questionable grounds. Miss Blackwell has been..." "That's Dr. Maya Rodriguez." Miller interrupted, recognizing Maya from the meetings he'd attended about the infrastructure contract. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Victoria, what have you done?" Victoria tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sound. Maya extended her hand to Miller professionally. "Mr. Miller, good to see you again. I believe we met during the preliminary contract discussions." Miller shook her hand, his own trembling slightly. "Dr. Rodriguez, I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable." "I assure you, it's quite all right," Maya said calmly. "Actually, this has been very educational. I'm learning a lot about current operational procedures." The way she said current operational procedures carried implications that made everyone within earshot nervous. On the CNN broadcast, Miguel Santos was introducing Maya to the viewing audience. Dr. Rodriguez earned her first PhD in civil engineering from MIT at age 24, then added a computer science PhD from Stanford. She founded Titan Infrastructure with a focus on what she calls human-centered design infrastructure that serves people rather than bureaucracies. Sarah Williams was narrating for her live stream audience. "This is insane. She's literally standing here being treated like a criminal, while CNN is calling her one of the most innovative engineers in America." Victoria finally found her voice. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Maya turned to face Victoria directly. "Miss Blackwell, you didn't know because you didn't ask. You looked at me and decided who I was based on my appearance. When I showed you my identification, you dismissed it. When I explained my profession, you mocked it. When I offered to demonstrate my equipment, you refused to listen." Maya's voice remained calm, but every word landed with precision. "You didn't know because you chose not to know. You preferred your assumptions to the truth." Carlos was still recording, capturing this remarkable moment of accountability. He'd worked in airport security long enough to know that conversations like this usually happened behind closed doors, in lawyers' offices with NDAs and settlement agreements. But Maya was having it right here in public on camera. The CNN broadcast showed file footage of Titan Infrastructure projects, a bridge in California that generated its own solar power. A terminal in Denver built from recycled materials, a transportation hub in Boston that processed its own wastewater. Maya's company didn't just build infrastructure, they reimagined it. Detective Murphy was taking notes, documenting everything for his report. This was going to be one of the most unusual incident reports he'd ever filed. "Dr. Rodriguez Murphy said, for the record, would you like to file a formal complaint about your treatment?" Maya considered the question carefully. "I think the record is quite clear already. Don't you, Officer Murphy? We have multiple witnesses, video documentation, and a very public setting. Sometimes the best complaint is simply the truth well documented." She gestured toward Carlos, who was still recording, and Sarah, whose live stream had reached over 100,000 viewers. Miller stepped forward desperately. "Dr. Rodriguez, please." This was clearly a misunderstanding. "Miss Blackwell is normally very professional, Mr. Miller." Maya interrupted gently. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was exactly what it appeared to be. The question isn't whether Miss Blackwell is normally professional. The question is what happens when someone shows you who they really are. Victoria finally straightened up, some of her composure returning. But it was the wrong kind of composure, defensive rather than reflective. "I was doing my job," Victoria said, her voice gaining strength. Security is about being suspicious. I can't help if that's uncomfortable for some people. The comment triggered another explosion of activity on social media. Carlos's recording captured Victoria doubling down even as the evidence of her bias played out on screens throughout the terminal. Maya shook her head slightly. Miss Blackwell, you're still doing it. Some people, you're still not seeing me as an individual wrongly treated. You're seeing me as part of a category that makes you uncomfortable. The CNN broadcast was wrapping up their introduction. We'll be speaking with Dr. Rodriguez live in just a few moments about her historic contract and her vision for the future of American transportation infrastructure. Maya checked her watch. I need to take that interview now. It was scheduled to be a celebratory announcement about innovation and progress. Instead, I suspect I'll be answering questions about why I was detained at my own airport. She looked around the gathering crowd: security officers, airport staff, passengers with phones, police personnel. This moment right here is going to be case study material for years. Not because of the contract, but because of what happened before anyone knew about the contract. Maya walked to where her luggage sat on the examination table and calmly began repacking her prototype scanner. Her movements were precise, professional, unhurried. Officer Mendez, she said without looking up, thank you for documenting this. Your courage is noted and appreciated. Carlos nodded, his phone still recording. Yes, ma'am. Someone needed to bear witness. Detective Murphy, thank you for your professionalism. You demonstrated exactly what proper procedure looks like. Murphy tipped his head. Just doing my job, ma'am. Maya closed her suitcase and shouldered her backpack. She looked like she was preparing to leave, but everyone sensed this wasn't over. Miss Blackwell, Maya said finally, you asked me to prove who I am. In about 30 seconds, CNN is going to do that for me. The question you should be asking yourself is, who are you? The terminal screens flickered, and suddenly there was Maya Rodriguez live on CNN speaking from the news studio she'd visited earlier that day. But the Maya on screen wore a tailored navy suit, professional makeup, and the bearing of someone completely at ease with power. The contrast with the woman standing in casual clothes at the security checkpoint was stark. Same face, same voice, completely different context. Victoria stared at the screens in growing horror. This wasn't some elaborate hoax or case of mistaken identity. This was exactly what Maya had been trying to tell her for the past 20 minutes. She had detained, harassed, and dismissed one of the most powerful women in American infrastructure, on camera, with witnesses, while that woman remained calm, professional, and more gracious than Victoria had any right to expect. And now the entire country was about to know about it. Maya Rodriguez had just become the most famous airport passenger in America, and Victoria Blackwell had just become the security officer who didn't know when to stop digging. Sarah Williams's Instagram livestream had become the most watched video in the platform's history. Over 200,000 viewers were tuned in, with the number climbing every second. The comment section had evolved from outrage to amazement to something approaching awe. She knew the whole time. This is the greatest plot twist ever. Victoria is about to lose her job on live TV. Maya is a queen for staying so calm. Carlos Mendez had moved to a better vantage point, his phone capturing both Maya's serene presence at the security checkpoint and the CNN broadcast playing on screens throughout the terminal. The split-screen effect was powerful. Maya Rodriguez, the detained passenger, and Dr. Maya Rodriguez, the CEO, existing simultaneously in the same space. The CNN anchor was setting up the interview. Dr. Rodriguez, this contract represents a fundamental reimagining of how airports function. Can you tell us about your vision for the new JFK? On the broadcast, Maya smiled confidently. Miguel, we're building more than an airport. We're creating a model for how infrastructure can serve human dignity. Every design choice reflects our belief that travel should enhance rather than diminish the passenger experience. Victoria Blackwell listened to these words while staring at the real Maya Rodriguez, who stood 5 feet away, calmly organizing her belongings. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. David Miller had his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers to someone who was probably his boss or his boss's boss, or possibly the governor of New York. Every few seconds, he glanced at Maya with the expression of a man watching his career flash before his eyes. The hashtag JFK discrimination was now trending nationwide, but it was being joined by others, Maya Rodriguez Titan Infrastructure Airport Justice. The story was taking on a life of its own across social media platforms. TikTok users were creating split-screen videos comparing Maya's treatment to her actual accomplishments. Twitter threads were documenting Titan Infrastructure's groundbreaking projects. LinkedIn was buzzing with posts about leadership and bias in corporate America. But it was happening in real time with Maya Rodriguez standing right there. Detective Murphy had been a cop long enough to recognize when a situation was becoming much bigger than anyone anticipated. He'd called for backup not because he needed additional security, but because he needed witnesses and documentation. This was going to be investigated by multiple agencies. Dr. Rodriguez Murphy said quietly, "I think you should know that this incident is already national news. Every major news outlet is picking up the story." Maya nodded without surprise. "Officer Murphy, I expected that. When you combine social media obvious injustice and a major news announcement, the story tells itself." She gestured toward Sarah's live stream, which now showed comments from viewers in dozens of countries. This isn't just about airport security anymore. It's about how we treat each other when we think no one important is watching. On CNN, Miguel Santos was asking about Maya's background. "You started Titan Infrastructure with just $50,000 and a garage in Oakland. What drove you to focus on infrastructure? Infrastructure shapes how people move through the world." "Television," Maya replied. "When it's designed with bias, it perpetuates inequality. When it's designed with intention, it can actually create opportunity and dignity." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in Terminal 4. Maya was literally speaking about designing infrastructure free from bias while standing in an airport where she'd just experienced bias firsthand. Victoria had been silent for several minutes, but now she stepped forward with what looked like desperation. "Dr. Rodriguez," she said, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just following standard security procedures." Miss Blackwell Maya interrupted gently. "We're past misunderstandings now. We have documentation of exactly what happened and why. The question isn't whether you followed procedures. The question is whether those procedures include treating passengers differently based on assumptions about their appearance." Carlos stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Ma'am, if I may, I've worked with Miss Blackwell for over a year. This isn't unusual behavior. It's a pattern." Victoria spun to face Carlos. "You're out of line, Mendez." "No, ma'am," Carlos replied steadily. "I'm on the record, and I'm tired of being quiet about things that are wrong just to keep my job comfortable." Maya observed this exchange with interest. "Officer Mendez, you realize you're taking a significant risk by speaking up." "Yes, ma'am. But watching you handle the situation with such grace made me realize that staying silent wasn't protecting anyone. It was just protecting a system that needed to change." The CNN interview was hitting its stride. Miguel Santos asked, "Your company's motto is infrastructure for everyone. What does that mean in practice?" "It means we don't build for some theoretical average user television," Maya explained. "We build for the teenager flying alone for the first time. The elderly passenger with mobility challenges the business traveler rushing between meetings, the family managing multiple children and luggage. Good infrastructure accommodates human diversity, not just human efficiency." Sarah Williams pulled her phone closer and spoke directly to her audience. "Do you understand what's happening here?" She's talking about designing airports for human dignity while being treated without dignity in an airport. This is the most incredible real-time irony I've ever witnessed. Her viewer count had passed 300,000. Major news outlets were reaching out to license her footage. Sarah realized she was documenting history. Miller finished his phone call and approached Maya with the careful steps of someone approaching a loaded bomb. "Dr. Rodriguez, I've been speaking with Port Authority leadership. They want to address this situation immediately. They're sending a delegation." Mr. Miller Maya said calmly, "I don't need a delegation. I need exactly what every passenger deserves: fair treatment based on facts rather than assumptions. The delegation should focus on ensuring this doesn't happen to other passengers who don't have billion-dollar contracts to protect them. The comment landed like a precision strike. Maya wasn't just defending herself. She was advocating for every passenger who'd faced similar treatment without cameras rolling or careers at stake. On screens throughout the terminal, CNN was showing footage of Titan infrastructure projects around the world. The company had redesigned airports in 3 countries, built sustainable bridges across major rivers, and created transportation hubs that generated more energy than they consumed. Victoria watched these achievements scroll past while standing next to the woman who'd made them all possible. The woman she'd spent 20 minutes dismissing as a fraud. I didn't know, Victoria whispered, though whether to herself or to Maya wasn't clear. Miss Blackwell Maya replied, "That's exactly the problem. You didn't know, and you didn't want to know. You preferred your assumption to the possibility that you might be wrong." Carlos was still recording, capturing Victoria's growing realization of what she'd done. But he was also capturing something else: Maya's consistent grace under pressure, her refusal to humiliate Victoria, even when she had every right to do so. The CNN interview was reaching its conclusion. Miguel Santos asked, "What's next for Titan infrastructure? We begin construction on the new JFK terminal next month," Television Maya announced. "Our goal is to create a model for how airports can serve as gateways not just to cities, but to better ways of thinking about human interaction." Maya checked her watch. The live interview was wrapping up, which meant she needed to make a decision about how this situation would end. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the growing crowd around the checkpoint, "I think it's time we concluded this educational experience." She shouldered her backpack and grabbed the handle of her rolling suitcase. "Miss Blackwell, I want you to know that everything that happened here tonight will be part of how we design the new security protocols. Not to embarrass you, but to ensure that no passenger experiences what I experienced." Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. "I'm going to lose my job, miss." Blackwell Maya said softly, "You lost your job the moment you decided that how someone looks matters more than who they are. I'm just the person who happened to be standing here when you made that choice visible." Maya began walking toward her gate, but the crowd followed her like she was leading a parade. Passengers, security officers, airport staff, and multiple people live streaming the entire procession. As they walked, Maya's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "This is Maya," she answered, putting the call on speaker so everyone could hear. "Dr. Rodriguez, this is Rachel Foster. CNN is asking if you're available for additional interviews about the JFK incident. Apparently there's video going viral of you being detained at the airport." Maya looked back at Sarah, who was still streaming live. "Tell them I'm very available. And Rachel, make sure they know that Officer Carlos Mendez and Sarah Williams documented everything with remarkable courage and professionalism. They should be part of any story about tonight." Carlos and Sarah looked stunned. Maya wasn't just acknowledging their role. She was ensuring they'd be recognized for their courage. The most powerful moment was still coming. But as Maya Rodriguez walked through Terminal 4, followed by cameras and crowds, and the growing realization that justice sometimes comes in unexpected packages, one thing was already clear: Victoria Blackwell had detained the wrong person, and the entire world was watching her learn that lesson in real time. Terminal 4 had transformed from a busy airport into something resembling a live television studio. CNN had dispatched a crew from their Manhattan bureau, Fox Business was streaming live from multiple angles, and reporters from at least 6 other networks were setting up equipment near the security checkpoint. Maya Rodriguez found herself at the center of a media storm she'd neither sought nor avoided. She stood near Gate 23, her London flight delayed indefinitely while airport security dealt with what was being called the JFK incident. Dr. Rodriguez called Miguel Santos, who had arrived from the CNN studio with a camera crew. "Can you walk us through what happened at security tonight?" Maya looked around at the gathered media, then at the crowd of passengers who'd witnessed the events. Sarah Williams was still streaming live, her viewer count now approaching 500,000. Carlos Mendez stood nearby, his own recording having been shared thousands of times across social media platforms. "Miguel, I think the story speaks for itself," Maya said calmly. "I was treated like a security threat based on assumptions about my appearance. The entire interaction was documented by multiple witnesses. The facts are clear, but Dr. Rodriguez pressed a Fox business reporter you're about to take operational control of this airport. How does this experience change your perspective on the modernization project?" Maya paused thoughtfully. "It confirms everything we've been saying about the need for human-centered design. Infrastructure isn't just about concrete and steel. It's about the human interactions that happen within those spaces." Meanwhile, Victoria Blackwell sat in the airport security office, facing what felt like a tribunal. David Miller was there along with 2 Port Authority supervisors and a representative from the private security company that managed the checkpoint operations. Victoria Miller said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "Walk me through your decision-making process tonight." Victoria's hands shook as she tried to explain. The passenger appeared suspicious. Inappropriate dress for first-class questionable documentation and a device that looked potentially dangerous on the X-ray. Inappropriate dress, Howe asked Janet Morrison, the Port Authority supervisor. Victoria realized she was walking into the same trap that had destroyed her evening. She didn't look like a typical first-class passenger. What does a typical first-class passenger look like, Victoria? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Victoria had built her career on making those kinds of judgments, on trusting her instincts about who belonged where. But when forced to articulate those instincts out loud, they revealed themselves as something much uglier. I can't explain it exactly, but I know it when I see it." Morrison and Miller exchanged glances. They'd heard enough. Back at Gate 23, Maya was surrounded by reporters, but she'd maintained control of the narrative through her consistent calm and her refusal to express anger or demand revenge. "The question isn't whether Miss Blackwell should be punished," Maya was explaining to a MSNBC reporter. "The question is how we create procedures that prevent this kind of bias from affecting any passenger's experience." Carlos Mendez had been approached by several reporters who wanted to interview him about what he'd witnessed. He found himself in an unexpected position of influence. "I've worked airport security for 2 years," he told a CNN correspondent. "I've seen passengers treated differently based on their race, their age, their appearance, their accent. Usually nobody records it. Usually nobody has the power to do anything about it. Tonight was different because Dr. Rodriguez had both the grace to handle it professionally and the platform to make it visible. Sarah Williams had become an accidental celebrity. Her Instagram livestream was being shared across every major social media platform, and news outlets were licensing her footage. But she was most proud of the comment thread where viewers from around the world were sharing their own experiences with discrimination and bias. "This is bigger than one airport," Sarah told her audience. "This is about how we treat each other when we think the person we're treating doesn't have any power to fight back." The airport's Executive Operations Center had become a crisis management hub. Phone calls were coming in from the Port Authority Board, the mayor's office, federal transportation officials, and civil rights organizations. Everyone wanted to know how JFK planned to respond to the incident. Maya's assistant, Rachel Foster, had arrived with a small team of Titan infrastructure executives. They'd set up a temporary command center at Gate 24, coordinating media requests and managing the company's response to the unexpected publicity. Maya Rachel said quietly, "We've got interview requests from 60 Minutes, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and about 20 other programs. The story is going international. BBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera. Everyone wants to talk about this." Maya nodded. "Schedule them thoughtfully. This is an opportunity to talk about infrastructure design and human dignity on a scale we never could have achieved with just the contract announcement." "There's something else," Rachel continued. "We're getting calls from passengers who've had similar experiences at JFK and other airports. People want to share their stories. They're saying this incident gave them courage to speak up." Maya looked around at the controlled chaos surrounding her. "Then, we need to make sure they have a platform. This can't be just about what happened to me tonight. It has to be about what happens to everyone who gets treated unfairly when nobody's watching. Detective Murphy was wrapping up his incident report, which had grown far longer and more complex than he'd anticipated. He'd been a police officer for 20 years, but he'd never documented anything quite like this. Dr. Rodriguez Murphy approached Maya during a brief break between interviews. "I want you to know that my report will reflect exactly what happened tonight. Miss Blackwell's conduct was inappropriate and potentially discriminatory. Thank you, Officer Murphy. Your professionalism throughout this situation was exemplary." Murphy hesitated, then continued. "Ma'am, I've seen a lot of bias in my 20 years on the job. Usually it happens in the shadows where it's hard to prove and harder to address. What happened tonight was different because it happened in the light with witnesses and cameras. That's not common. Officer Murphy, that's exactly why this matters. Not because I'm a CEO with cameras watching, but because bias shouldn't depend on who's watching to be wrong. The CNN live broadcast was providing continuous coverage now with updates every few minutes. Maya's story had become the lead item on every major news network, trending on social media platforms and generating op-ed pieces about racial bias, airport security, and corporate leadership. But perhaps the most significant development was happening in conference rooms across the country, where executives were watching the coverage and asking themselves, how would our employees handle a situation like this? Victoria Blackwell was learning that question the hard way. Victoria David Miller said in the security office, "You're suspended pending a full investigation. Please turn in your badge, radio, and access cards." Victoria had known this was coming, but hearing it still felt like a physical blow. "David, I've worked here for 3 years. I've never had a complaint." "You've had 7 complaints in the past 18 months. Miller corrected, consulting his notes. "All from passengers who felt they were treated unfairly based on their appearance or accent. We just never had video documentation before." Victoria stared at him. 7. "I never heard about 7 complaints because we handled them quietly. Informal resolutions, apologies, policy reminders. We thought we were protecting you. Instead, we were enabling a pattern of behavior that culminated in tonight's disaster." The revelation hit Victoria like cold water. Her supervisors had known about her bias and had chosen to manage it quietly rather than address it directly. Now that protection had evaporated, leaving her exposed and isolated. Back at Gate 23, Maya was preparing for her biggest interview yet. 60 Minutes had arrived with a full crew ready to do an in-depth piece about the incident and its implications for airport security nationwide. Dr. Rodriguez, the 60 Minutes correspondent, asked, "Some people are saying this is being blown out of proportion, that security officers have to make quick judgments about potential threats. What's your response to that?" Maya looked directly into the camera. "Security is absolutely important. But security based on bias isn't actually security, it's discrimination wearing a uniform. Real security comes from professional assessment of actual risks, not assumptions about what threatening people look like." The interview continued for 20 minutes, covering everything from Maya's background to her company's philosophy, to her vision for how this incident could drive positive change in airport operations. As the cameras rolled, Victoria Blackwell was cleaning out her desk in the security office, placing 3 years' worth of commendations and performance reviews into a cardboard box. The irony wasn't lost on her that some of those commendations praised her for maintaining high security standards and attention to detail. Carlos Mendez was also being interviewed, though his conversation was with internal affairs investigators who wanted to understand his decision to record the incident. Officer Mendez, the investigator, asked, "Why did you choose to document Miss Blackwell's behavior rather than simply report it through normal channels?" Carlos thought carefully before answering. "Because normal channels had failed. I'd seen this pattern before, and it had been reported before, and nothing changed. Sometimes you have to document the truth in a way that can't be ignored or minimized. And you felt comfortable making that decision." "No, sir, I didn't feel comfortable at all. I felt necessary." The investigator made notes. Carlos's recording would become crucial evidence in the formal investigation that was already being launched. Sarah Williams was experiencing her own surreal evening. Her Instagram live stream had made her an accidental journalist, and she was handling interview requests from major news outlets who wanted to understand what she'd witnessed. The most incredible thing Sarah told a Washington Post reporter wasn't the bias. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon. The incredible thing was watching Dr. Rodriguez handle it with such dignity while knowing the entire time that she had the power to end Miss Blackwell's career with a phone call. As the evening progressed, it became clear that this wasn't just a story about one incident at one airport. It was becoming a catalyst for conversations about bias in customer service, airport security, and corporate leadership across industries. Maya Rodriguez had become something she'd never intended to be the face of dignified resistance to discrimination. Her calm response to unfair treatment was being held up as a model for how to handle bias while maintaining one's integrity and humanity. But the most powerful moment was still ahead, because while everyone was focused on Maya's grace under pressure, they were about to learn something that would transform this story from remarkable to legendary. Maya Rodriguez hadn't just endured discrimination at JFK Airport. She was about to ensure it never happened again. At 9:47 p.m., exactly 2 hours and 30 minutes after Victoria Blackwell had first told Maya Rodriguez she didn't belong in the first-class security line, Maya stood before a bank of microphones in Terminal 4's main concourse. The scene was unprecedented in airport history. Major news networks had set up live broadcasting equipment. Dozens of passengers held up phones streaming to social media platforms around the world. Airport staff lined the balconies overlooking the concourse, watching history unfold in their workplace. Ladies and gentlemen, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the terminal sound system. Tonight has been educational for all of us. She looked poised and professional despite the casual clothes she still wore. The contrast between her appearance and her authority had become the visual symbol of the evening's events. 2.5 hours ago, I was detained by airport security based on assumptions about my appearance and credentials. That detention was witnessed, documented, and broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Behind the crowd of reporters, Victoria Blackwell watched from the security office where she was completing her exit interviews. Her badge and radio sat on the desk beside a box containing her personal belongings. She looked like someone watching her entire world collapse in slow motion. The question everyone's been asking Maya continued is what happens next. How do we respond to bias when it's this visible, this documented, this impossible to deny? Carlos Mendez stood near the back of the crowd, still in his security uniform, but knowing his role at the airport was about to change dramatically. His decision to record Victoria's behavior had made him an unlikely hero, but he was more interested in Maya's answer than in his newfound fame. "I want to share something with you," Maya said. Tonight wasn't just about one security officer making poor decisions. It was about a culture that enabled those decisions. It was about procedures that allowed bias to masquerade as security. It was about a failure to create accountability for how passengers are treated. Sarah Williams continued live streaming her viewer count, now exceeding 1 million people across multiple platforms. The comments section had evolved from outrage to anticipation. Everyone sensed something significant was coming. "So, here's what happens next," Maya announced. "Effective, immediately, Titan Infrastructure is implementing what we're calling the Dignity Protocol at every facility we design, build, or operate." She gestured to Rachel Foster, who stepped forward with a tablet displaying detailed plans that had clearly been prepared in advance. "The Dignity Protocol has 3 components," Maya explained. First, mandatory bias recognition training for every employee who interacts with the public. Not sensitivity training that teaches people to be polite while maintaining their prejudices, but actual bias recognition that helps people identify and interrupt their own discriminatory assumptions. The crowd leaned in. This wasn't just a response to the evening's events. This was a comprehensive solution that had obviously been in development long before Victoria Blackwell had made her fatal mistake. Second, real-time monitoring of all customer interactions using artificial intelligence to identify patterns of differential treatment. When someone is treated differently based on their appearance, accent, or other demographic factors, the program flags it immediately for review. A reporter called out, "How does that work in practice?" Maya smiled. Every interaction at every checkpoint, every customer service counter, every security station is analyzed for consistency. If Officer A treats passengers with certain characteristics differently than Officer B, or if the same officer treats different passengers differently for the same violations, that pattern becomes visible immediately. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. If such a system had been in place tonight, her bias would have been flagged the moment she asked Maya to verify credentials that she hadn't requested from other passengers. Third, Maya continued mandatory body cameras for all security personnel, with footage automatically uploaded to a blockchain-based system that prevents editing or deletion. Full transparency, full accountability, full documentation of every interaction. The implications were staggering. Maya wasn't just responding to one incident. She was proposing a complete transformation of how airports operated. "But Dr. Rodriguez called out a Fox News reporter. "Isn't this an overreaction to one unfortunate incident?" Maya's expression hardened slightly, the first sign of real emotion she'd shown all evening. "This wasn't one unfortunate incident," she said firmly. "This was one visible incident. Officer Mendez, would you join me up here?" Carlos looked surprised, but made his way through the crowd to the makeshift podium. "Officer Mendez, in your time working airport security, have you witnessed other examples of passengers being treated differently based on their appearance?" Carlos looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. "Yes, ma'am, multiple times. And have those incidents been documented and addressed?" "Some were reported, ma'am. Most weren't followed up on in any meaningful way." Maya nodded. Officer Mendez had the courage tonight to document what he was witnessing, even though it put his job at risk. How many other officers have seen bias and stayed silent? How many passengers have been mistreated when there weren't cameras rolling? The question resonated through the terminal. Everyone knew the answer. "The dignity protocol isn't an overreaction," Maya said. "It's long overdue." She pulled out her phone and showed the screen to the cameras. "I've just sent a message to the CEOs of every major airline, airport operator, and transportation security company in the country. The message is simple. Titan Infrastructure's new facilities will only partner with organizations that adopt the Dignity Protocol. If you want to operate in our airports, you operate with full transparency and accountability." The announcement sent shockwaves through the aviation industry representatives watching the broadcast. Maya had just leveraged her company's massive influence to force industry-wide change. "There's one more thing," Maya said. She gestured toward Sarah Williams, who was still live-streaming from the crowd. Sarah Williams, the travel blogger who documented tonight's events, has agreed to become Titan Infrastructure's new Director of Passenger Experience Documentation. She'll be responsible for collecting and verifying passenger treatment stories from airports around the world. Sarah's expression showed pure shock. She'd gone from travel blogger to corporate executive in a single evening, and Officer Carlos Mendez has accepted a position as Titan Infrastructure's new Head of Security, Ethics, and Training. He'll be responsible for implementing the Dignity Protocol at all Titan facilities. Carlos looked equally stunned. Maya had just transformed two unlikely witnesses into key players in airport security reform. Finally, Maya said, "I want to address Victoria Blackwell directly." The terminal fell completely silent. Victoria, watching from the security office, felt her heart stop. "Miss Blackwell, you made assumptions about me tonight based on my appearance. Those assumptions were wrong, and they led to discriminatory treatment that was witnessed by millions of people around the world." Maya paused, and Victoria braced herself for public humiliation. "But I don't believe you're evil. I believe you're the product of an environment that rewarded your biases instead of correcting them. An environment that handled complaints quietly instead of addressing patterns. An environment that protected discrimination instead of passengers." Victoria felt tears starting to form. This was not the response she'd expected. "Miss Blackwell, you've lost your job tonight, and that's appropriate. But I want you to understand something. This isn't about destroying you. This is about rebuilding things so that other officers don't make the choices you made tonight. Maya looked directly toward the security office, though she couldn't see Victoria through the tinted glass. I hope you'll learn from this experience. I hope you'll become someone who recognizes bias instead of acting on it. And if you do that work, if you really commit to understanding what happened tonight and why it was wrong, then maybe someday you can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Victoria broke down completely, her sobs echoing through the security office. Maya's grace in the face of discrimination was more devastating than any anger could have been. Maya stepped back from the microphones. The press conference is over. Thank you all for bearing witness to what happened tonight. Tomorrow, we start building something better. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya walked quietly toward her gate. Her London flight had been rescheduled for the morning, but she was no longer just a passenger traveling for business. She was the woman who had turned one night of discrimination into a movement for structural change. The countdown was over. The real work was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through Terminal 4's floor-to-ceiling windows as Maya Rodriguez walked through the concourse toward her rescheduled London flight. She wore the same jeans and MIT sweatshirt from the night before, but everything else had changed. Passengers recognized her now. Some nodded respectfully as she passed. Others took discreet photos. A few approached to thank her for what she'd done. Maya handled each interaction with the same quiet grace she'd shown during the confrontation with Victoria Blackwell. Dr. Rodriguez. A young black woman in a business suit stopped her near Gate 20. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been treated exactly the way you were treated last night, but I never had the platform to do anything about it. Maya paused, giving the woman her full attention. What's your name? Jennifer Morrison. I'm a software engineer flying to Seattle for client meetings. Jennifer, what happened to me last night wasn't unique because it was wrong. It was unique because it was visible. Your experiences mattered just as much as mine. Jennifer nodded, tears forming in her eyes. The dignity protocol you announced, when will it start? It already has, Maya replied. As of this morning, every Titan facility operates under the new standards. Other companies will follow, or they'll lose access to our partnerships. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Foster. CNN wants a follow-up interview at 8 a.m. Car is waiting outside. As Maya made her way toward the exit, she passed the security checkpoint where everything had unfolded 12 hours earlier. Carlos Mendez was there training a new crew of officers on proper documentation procedures. He saw Maya and walked over. Dr. Rodriguez Carlos said, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity you've given me. I promise I won't let you down. Officer Mendez, actually it's Director Mendez now, you already proved your character last night. I'm not worried about you letting me down. I'm excited to see what you build. Carlos smiled. The first group of officers starts bias recognition training today. We're using last night's footage as a case study. Maya nodded approvingly. Good. Make sure they understand that Victoria wasn't a bad person who did something evil. She was a person with unexamined biases who worked in a system that never challenged those biases. The goal is prevention, not punishment. As Maya continued toward the exit, she passed a coffee shop where Victoria Blackwell sat alone at a corner table. Victoria looked like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and worn. Maya could have walked past without acknowledgement. Instead, she approached Victoria's table. Miss Blackwell. Victoria looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Dr. Rodriguez. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. But I wanted you to know that my offer last night was genuine. If you want to do the work to understand what happened and why there will be opportunities for you to contribute to positive change. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. How can you be so generous after what I did to you? Maya sat down across from Victoria. Because holding on to anger would make me a smaller person, and I can't build better systems from a place of smallness. What you did was wrong, but who you become next is still up to you. Victoria wiped her eyes. I've been thinking all night about the passengers I treated unfairly. People I dismissed, questioned, or delayed based on how they looked. I never thought of myself as prejudiced, but watching those videos. Recognition is the first step, Maya said gently. The second step is committing to different choices. Maya stood to leave, then paused. Victoria, I'm serious about giving you a chance to be part of the solution, but only if you're willing to do the hard work of examining your own biases. Only if you're committed to becoming someone who protects dignity instead of undermining it. Victoria nodded through her tears. I want to try. Maya left Victoria with her thoughts and continued toward the exit where a CNN crew was waiting. But her mind was already on the broader implications of what had begun last night. The Today Show interview went live at 8 a.m. with Maya speaking via satellite from JFK while the hosts broadcasted from their Manhattan studio. Dr. Rodriguez asked Savannah Guthrie 24 hours ago most Americans had never heard your name. Now you're being called a transformative figure in civil rights. How does that feel? Maya appeared composed despite having been up all night. Savannah, I don't think of myself as a civil rights figure. I think of myself as an engineer who saw a system that wasn't working and designed a solution. But this wasn't just about fixing a system, was it? This was about dignity, respect, and how we treat each other. Those things are part of good system design, Maya replied. Infrastructure isn't just about moving people efficiently. It's about moving people with dignity. What happened to me last night was a design failure, not a human failure. What do you mean by design failure? Maya leaned forward slightly. Victoria Blackwell was trained by a process that rewarded her biases instead of correcting them. She worked in an environment that handled discrimination complaints quietly instead of transparently. She was given authority without accountability. Those are design failures, and they're fixable. And the dignity protocol is your fix. It's one fix. Real change requires multiple approaches: training, monitoring, transparency, accountability, and cultural transformation. You can't solve bias with a single policy memo. The interview continued for 15 minutes with Maya explaining how the dignity protocol would work in practice and announcing that 12 major airport operators had already committed to implementing it. As Maya finished the interview, her assistant Rachel approached with an urgent message. Maya, we just got a call from the Department of Transportation. The secretary wants to meet with you about implementing the dignity protocol as a federal requirement for all airports receiving federal funding. Maya smiled. Schedule it. But let's also schedule meetings with disability rights organizations, civil rights groups, and passenger advocacy organizations. If we're going to change how airports work, everyone affected by that change should have a voice in designing it. Meanwhile, Victoria Blackwell was making the hardest phone call of her life. Mom Victoria said into her phone, I need to tell you something. I lost my job last night and it's going to be all over the news. Victoria's mother listened as Victoria explained what had happened, her voice breaking as she described her own behavior. Victoria, her mother said, finally, I'm disappointed. But I'm not surprised. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. What do you mean, honey? You've always made assumptions about people. I heard it in how you talked about your coworkers, your neighbors, people you met. I thought you'd grow out of it. I should have said something. Victoria realized that her bias hadn't developed in isolation. It had been enabled by silence by people who noticed, but didn't speak up by a culture that preferred comfort to confrontation. Mom, I want to change. I want to be better than this. Then you need to do the work, Victoria. Real work. Not just saying you're sorry, but understanding why you thought what you thought and chose what you chose. As Victoria ended the call, she made a decision. She pulled up Maya Rodriguez's company website and found the contact information. She was going to take Maya up on her offer, but she was going to earn it. By noon, the story had gone international. BBC Al Jazeera and news outlets in dozens of countries were covering what they called the JFK incident and its implications for airport security worldwide. Maya Rodriguez had transformed from infrastructure CEO to global symbol of dignified resistance. But more importantly, she had used her moment of visibility to create lasting change that would affect millions of travelers. The identity reveal was complete. The woman Victoria Blackwell had dismissed as unworthy of first-class treatment was now reshaping the entire aviation industry. Within 48 hours of the JFK incident, the aviation industry was in upheaval. Maya Rodriguez's dignity protocol had become the standard that every airport operator, airline, and security company was being measured against. TSA Administrator Patricia Wilson called an emergency meeting of all regional directors. "I want to be clear," she announced to the room full of security officials. "What happened at JFK was unacceptable, and it cannot happen again. We're implementing immediate reforms." The reforms were comprehensive mandatory body cameras for all TSA officers, real-time bias, monitoring software at every checkpoint, and quarterly reviews of passenger treatment patterns. Officers who showed patterns of discriminatory behavior would be retrained or removed. But this isn't just about avoiding another viral video, Wilson continued. This is about becoming the security force Americans deserve. Professional, fair, and focused on actual threats rather than assumptions. Meanwhile, at JFK, David Miller was conducting his own emergency staff meeting. The airport's entire security operation was being overhauled in real time. Effective immediately, Miller announced every passenger interaction will be recorded and reviewed. Every complaint will be investigated within 24 hours. Every officer will complete bias recognition training before returning to duty. Carlos Mendez, now Director of Security Ethics, was leading the training programs. He found himself in the surreal position of teaching courses on proper procedure, using video of his former supervisor as an example of what not to do. The key thing to understand, Carlos told a group of security officers, is that bias isn't always conscious. Miss Blackwell probably didn't wake up that morning planning to discriminate against anyone. But she had unconscious assumptions that influenced her decisions. One of the officers raised her hand. So, how do we avoid making the same mistakes? Carlos pulled up a split-screen video on his tablet, Maya Rodriguez being questioned at the checkpoint, and Maya Rodriguez being interviewed on CNN in a business suit. "By remembering that you never know who someone really is," Carlos replied. Miss Blackwell saw a young black woman in casual clothes and assumed she didn't belong in first class. She never considered that she might be looking at one of the most powerful people in American infrastructure. The training was happening simultaneously across the country. Airport after airport, security company after security company implementing versions of the dignity protocol to avoid becoming the next viral discrimination story. Sarah Williams was experiencing her own transformation. Her spontaneous livestream had evolved into a formal role as Titan Infrastructure's Director of Passenger Experience Documentation. She was traveling to airports worldwide, documenting passenger treatment and helping implement dignity-focused reforms. "The beautiful thing about what Dr. Rodriguez created," Sarah told a reporter from Travel and Leisure magazine, "is that it's not just about preventing discrimination. It's about creating positive experiences for everyone." Sarah was at Denver International Airport observing the implementation of new passenger interaction protocols. Officers were friendlier, more patient, more professional. The bias monitoring software had flagged several officers for additional training, but no one had been fired. The focus was on education and improvement, not punishment. Victoria Blackwell was also undergoing transformation, though hers was more personal and painful. She'd enrolled in a bias recognition program at Columbia University and was seeing a therapist who specialized in prejudice reduction. "The hardest part," Victoria told her therapist, "is realizing how many people I hurt without even knowing it. How many passengers I made feel unwelcome or unsafe, and how does that realization feel?" the therapist asked. "Terrible, but also motivating. Like I want to find a way to make amends." Victoria had reached out to Maya's company and was volunteering for a pilot program that paired former discriminatory officers with bias researchers to study how prejudice develops and how it can be unlearned. "Dr. Rodriguez was right," Victoria wrote in her first research report. "I wasn't evil, but I was enabled by a process that never challenged my assumptions. The goal has to be building systems that make bias visible and correctable." The program was showing promising results. Other officers who had been fired or disciplined for discriminatory behavior were volunteering to participate, turning their experiences into research that could prevent future incidents. Meanwhile, Maya Rodriguez was preparing to testify before Congress about aviation security reform. The House Transportation Committee had called emergency hearings on bias in airport security, and Maya was the star witness. Doctor Rodriguez asked Congressman James Mitchell, "Some critics say your dignity protocol is an overreaction to a single incident. How do you respond?" Maya looked directly at the committee. "Congressman, this wasn't a single incident. This was a single visible incident. The protocols we've implemented have already identified dozens of similar patterns at airports across the country. The only difference is that my experience was documented and broadcast." She gestured to a display showing statistics from the first month of dignity protocol implementation. "We found discriminatory patterns in passenger processing at 67% of participating airports. Officers treating passengers with certain characteristics differently, longer wait times for specific demographic groups, higher rates of additional screening for travelers with certain names or appearances." The statistics were damning, but Maya wasn't finished. "More importantly, we found that transparency and training can eliminate these patterns. When officers know they're being monitored for bias and when they receive proper education about unconscious prejudice, discriminatory behavior drops by 89%. Congressman Mitchell leaned forward. "You're saying the solution is surveillance?" "I'm saying the solution is accountability," Maya replied. "We monitor doctors to ensure they provide quality care. We monitor pilots to ensure they fly safely. Why wouldn't we monitor security officers to ensure they treat passengers fairly?" The hearing continued for 3 hours with Maya fielding questions about privacy implementation costs and effectiveness. By the end, even the most skeptical committee members seemed convinced that the Dignity Protocol represented a necessary evolution in aviation security. The most powerful testimony came from passengers who had experienced discrimination and now felt safer traveling. "I used to dread flying," testified Maria Santos, a Latina businesswoman from Phoenix. "I always got extra screening, always got questioned about my travel, always felt like I was being treated as a threat." Since the Dignity Protocol was implemented, travel feels normal for the first time in years. Similar stories came from across the country. Black passengers who no longer faced extended questioning, Muslim travelers who weren't automatically selected for additional screening, young people who weren't assumed to be problems. The transformation wasn't complete. Changing embedded cultural biases takes time. But within 2 months of the JFK incident, passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment had dropped by 78% at airports implementing the Dignity Protocol. Maya Rodriguez had done something remarkable. She'd taken a moment of personal discrimination and transformed it into industry-wide reform that was making travel better for millions of people. But the most significant change was cultural. Airport employees were talking openly about bias, receiving training on unconscious prejudice, and being held accountable for treating all passengers with dignity. Victoria Blackwell, watching this transformation from her position as a volunteer researcher, felt a complex mix of regret and hope. "I destroyed my career in one night of bad decisions," Victoria wrote in her journal. "But maybe that destruction created space for something better to grow. Maybe my failure can help other people succeed." It was a painful kind of redemption, but it was redemption nonetheless. 1 year later, Maya Rodriguez stood in the center of JFK's new Terminal 1, watching passengers move through security checkpoints that looked nothing like the ones from her infamous night of detention. The space was bright and welcoming, with natural light streaming through smart glass that automatically adjusted for comfort. Security stations were designed for efficiency and dignity, with clear sight lines that eliminated hidden corners where bias might flourish. Every interaction was recorded and analyzed in real time. Officers wore body cameras that automatically uploaded footage to secure servers. AI systems monitored for patterns of differential treatment, flagging any inconsistencies for immediate review. But the most striking change was cultural. Security officers greeted passengers with genuine respect, regardless of their appearance, age, or accent. The fear and suspicion that had characterized airport security for decades had been replaced by professionalism and courtesy. "It's beautiful," said Carlos Mendez, joining Maya at the observation deck overlooking the main checkpoint. As Director of Security Ethics for Titan Infrastructure, Carlos had helped implement dignity protocol systems at 43 airports worldwide. "The technology is impressive," Maya replied, "but the real transformation is in the people. When you create systems that reward fairness and transparency, people rise to meet those expectations." Below them, a young Muslim woman in a hijab moved through security without additional questioning or special screening. 6 months earlier, she would likely have been selected for extra attention. Today, she was just another passenger. Sarah Williams approached with her tablet, fresh from documenting passenger experiences at the new terminal. As Director of Passenger Experience Documentation, Sarah had traveled to airports on 6 continents, helping implement dignity-focused reforms. "The satisfaction scores are incredible," Sarah reported. 98% positive feedback on security interactions. Passenger stress levels during screening have dropped 67%. And here's the really amazing part. Actual security effectiveness has improved too. Maya nodded. She'd known this would happen. When officers focused on actual threats rather than demographic assumptions, they became better at identifying real problems. "Any word on the federal implementation?" Maya asked. "Congress passed the Dignity in Travel Act yesterday," Sarah announced. "Every airport receiving federal funding has to implement bias monitoring and transparency protocols within 18 months. Maya smiled. What had started as one night of discrimination at one airport checkpoint had become the law of the land for American aviation. A year ago, Victoria Blackwell had lost her job and her identity as a security professional. Today, she was a different person entirely. Victoria stood before a group of new TSA recruits at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, sharing her story as part of the mandatory bias awareness curriculum. "I want you to understand something," Victoria told the recruits. "I didn't think of myself as prejudiced. I thought I was being professional, thorough, security conscious. But I was making decisions based on assumptions rather than facts." She clicked to a video of her interaction with Maya Rodriguez, which had become the most watched training video in TSA history. "Watch my body language, listen to my tone, notice how I treated Dr. Rodriguez differently than I would have treated other passengers. This is what unconscious bias looks like in action." The recruits watched the footage with uncomfortable recognition. Many saw their own potential biases reflected in Victoria's behavior. "The beautiful thing about bias," Victoria continued, "is that once you recognize it, you can choose to act differently. You can interrupt your own assumptions. You can choose to treat every passenger with equal dignity." Victoria had found purpose in her downfall. She'd become one of the country's most effective trainers on bias recognition, helping thousands of security officers avoid the mistakes she'd made. "Dr. Rodriguez gave me something precious when she destroyed my career," Victoria told the recruits. "She gave me the opportunity to become a better person." Back at JFK, Maya was preparing for her final interview about the anniversary of what media outlets had dubbed the Dignity Incident. Dr. Rodriguez asked the CNN correspondent, "When you were being detained a year ago, did you imagine it would lead to this kind of transformation?" Maya looked around the bustling terminal where passengers of every description moved through security with ease and respect. "I hoped it might," Maya replied, "but transformation of this scale requires more than one person's experience. It required Carlos Mendez having the courage to document what he was witnessing. It required Sarah Williams choosing to broadcast rather than look away. It required Victoria Blackwell eventually choosing growth over defensiveness." "What about Miss Blackwell specifically? Some people criticized you for not seeking punishment." Maya considered the question carefully. Punishment might have felt satisfying in the moment, but it wouldn't have prevented other officers from making similar choices. Teaching Victoria to recognize and interrupt bias has helped thousands of security personnel become more professional and fair. "So, you have no regrets about how you handled that night?" "None at all." Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is respond to injustice with a commitment to justice. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. As the interview concluded, Maya received a text message from Victoria, watching your anniversary interview. Thank you for seeing the possibility of redemption when I could only see failure. The TSA recruits today were incredible. Your influence is still changing minds and hearts. Maya smiled and typed back, "You did the hard work of changing. I just provided the opportunity, proud of the person you've become. The transformation was complete, but the work continued." Bias didn't disappear overnight, and maintaining dignity-focused systems required constant attention. But the foundation had been laid for a more just and equitable way of treating travelers. That evening, Maya walked alone through Terminal 1, as had become her habit. The space hummed with efficient, respectful activity. Passengers moved through security without fear or frustration. Officers performed their duties with professionalism and courtesy. She paused at the memorial wall that had been installed near the main checkpoint. It honored all passengers who experienced discrimination in pursuit of security and committed the airport to dignity for every traveler. At the center of the memorial was a simple quote, "True security protects both safety and dignity. When we sacrifice one for the other, we achieve neither." Maya Rodriguez had learned that the most powerful response to injustice wasn't anger or revenge, but the patient work of building something better. She'd transformed one night of discrimination into a movement for comprehensive change that would benefit millions of travelers for generations to come. The woman, who had been told she didn't belong in the first-class security line, had rebuilt the entire process to ensure that everyone belonged. 2 years later, Maya's Dignity for Security protocols had been adopted by airports worldwide. Discrimination complaints dropped 89%, while passenger satisfaction reached all-time highs. The JFK incident became a Harvard Business School case study on conscious leadership and the power of change. Victoria never worked in security again, but she found her calling as a national trainer on bias recognition. Her transformation from discriminator to educator inspired thousands of officers to examine their own assumptions and choose fairness over prejudice. Carlos Mendez was promoted to National Director of Security Ethics, overseeing dignity protocols at airports across America. His courage in documenting discrimination when it mattered most became a model for ethical leadership under pressure. Sarah Williams parlayed her accidental journalism into a successful career advocating for passenger rights. Her original livestream remained pinned on Maya's company social media, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that change happens one moment of courage at a time. Maya kept the MIT sweatshirt she wore that night hanging in her office as a reminder that true power isn't about the authority you hold, but about the dignity you give. Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to move mountains. You just need to stand firmly on the truth. The most powerful legacy wasn't the technology or the policies or the procedures. It was the cultural shift that made discrimination visible, unacceptable, and ultimately unnecessary. Maya Rodriguez had proven that one person's grace under pressure could transform an entire industry's approach to justice. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because Maya's story isn't unique. It's happening everywhere, every day. The only question is, when it's your moment to choose dignity over prejudice, what will you do? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your true power? Have you witnessed discrimination and wondered whether to speak up? Your stories matter. Your choices matter. Your courage matters. Maya Rodriguez showed us that true leadership isn't about the authority you hold. It's about the dignity you give to others, especially when they have no power to demand it from you. Subscribe and hit that notification bell if you believe in justice, dignity, and the power of standing up for what's right. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that grace under pressure can change the world. Until next time, remember, you never know who you're really talking to. Treat everyone like they matter, because they do. And sometimes the quietest person in the room has the power to transform everything. Your moment of choice is coming. Make it count.